Okay, this is one of the better shots I noticed. You can really see the defensive walls here at the Birmingham Meeting House. Where I'm standing right now, this is the mass grave that I was talking about where the troops were buried after the battle. You can see right where that tree is, where it's being protected by a fence. That's where the mass grave would be, right where I'm standing. And all the way up the wall, they buried their dead in this general area. Now, they weren't just thrown into a hole real deep. They didn't have time to dig a hole that deep. They weren't here that long. The British actually camped in this general area after the battle for about 5 days, which was quite long at that time. So what we see here is, they dug trenches, and a trench line would have been about 3 or 4 feet deep, and it would be a trench, and it extended all the way up to the wall, probably about a foot off of the wall, and all the way back here in this general area, and they just lined them up. They lined the dead up one at a time. Now, generally, I think a lot of the British, they really didn't pick the coats or anything off the officers. They just threw them in with their boots, their jackets, and everything. So there's a lot of artifacts, maybe all kinds of weapons and things that are underneath the ground here. Now, the Quakers are interesting people. There was a documentary that was done here. It was probably about 10 years ago, at which time I was talking to one of the individuals that were part of the Birmingham Meeting House, and they wouldn't allow the reenactors here. It would have been really cool to see a reenactment of what these Continentals look like lined up against this wall. And it was funny because to enter here, the Continentals had muskets. They had to leave their muskets outside. They had to leave them off the property because Quakers are peaceful people and they didn't want any weapons or muskets in this area. So basically the reenactment had to happen across the street. So they didn't have a reenactment at the Birmingham Meeting House because of Quaker involvement, which I think is great. I think that they like to keep that kind of spirit going. That's fine. But I would love to have one of the History Channel come out here and actually do some ground penetrating radar to actually map this and find out exactly where the mass grave is. So, for posterity, we know exactly where it is, who's buried here, and, where the mass grave is. There is a stone right off to my right here. It's just explaining that there is a mass grave here, and it was a mix between Americans and British at that time that died and were killed during the battle here. Now, another tidbit about this, the Birmingham Meeting House is the bodies that were left here. This was probably one of the bloodiest engagements between the two forces. It was 30,000 men at one time. Now that was the biggest land battle in the Revolutionary War. You got about 12,000 to about 14,000 and wagons, provisions. You had drivers that drove wagons. So basically you had about 30,000 people in this general about 15 square mile area, and everybody was firing at each other. Everybody was trying to knock everybody off. There's the Bruce Monday's book that I showed you earlier explains that the bodies that were left from here to the next place we're going to go was incredible. There must have been at least 200 dead laying in about 300-yard area in this general area. So there could be bodies buried all over. We just don't know because some of the Quaker accounts, they didn't keep records. They were, like I said, peaceful people. They didn't say, I have a soldier that's buried on my property. It was just kind of assumed that the bodies disappeared after the battle and were interred.